This first window here is called the image parts window, and this is going to show you all of the images that you've pre-created, probably in something like GIMP or Photoshop, etc. So that's where you get all your images from. You can create as many subfolders as you want to organize your images, because eventually there will be a lot of them if it's a large game project. Next is the frame preview. This is where you actually create and preview in the case of going through an animation or frames like this. This is where you preview a frame or actually edit the frame. For instance, clicking on one of the used parts selects it and allows you to use this box if you want to make adjustments, transform, rotations, scaling, all of that sort. You can even change the drawing mode, that's additive mode, to subtractive mode, handy for special effects. This tool does support PNG files, including 24-bit alpha blended PNG files. So you have alpha blending, or you can also use additive or subtractive mode on any image within a frame. So that's what this window is for. This window is the animation preview window. We'll get more into that later. That is to preview animations that you've created. The next window is the frame list window, and this one is a list of all the frames that you've created, and by clicking on the frame in this box you have a frame preview up to that particular frame, so you can edit it if you so choose. Next, down here we have filled rectangle. Oh, I'm sorry, this is to create a filled rectangle. We'll get into that later. But beneath that is the list of all the parts currently used. Especially once you have a lot of parts going in a single frame, it becomes very tricky to try to select a part just by clicking. So by going in this list here, you can select specific parts and then go back to your frame editor window and move them with the W, S, A, or D keys, as well as their shortcut keys for all of the transformations like rotation and adjusting the width or the height. We'll get into that later. So this is just a handy way. You can select multiple things at the same time in this list. They don't have to be in the same order. You can, as you can see, I skipped image number 10 and 11. I did that using holding the control key before I clicked the next part. Next is collision rectangles, which is really important for, or can be very important for video game stuff, and action points. We'll get into that later. And the final window is character and animations. A character is basically a collection of animations, and so here we have the character player. He's called player selected, and currently he only has one animation. So as I create animations, they would be populated in the character down here. Next would be, if you click on a specific animation, this part here tells you which frames are used in the animation, and then the duration of that particular frame within the animation. Next is or character variables, I should say, and this is also really handy for video game type stuff. I'll get to that later. And lastly, frame sounds. Per frame of a given animation, you can actually trigger up to 4 separate sound samples and control the volume individually. And I'll get into more detail in the next. So that's the way the interface generally looks, but this is a lot of information, and you don't always need all of these windows at any given time. And just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, let's go back and click on this guy's head for this part info box pop-up. This not only tells you what could be important information about that particular part in that particular frame, what angle it's set to, its opacity, which let me just show you. You can adjust its opacity like so by slider bar or the buttons, or actually typing in a number and pressing enter. But not only does it give this information, you can apply whatever, for instance, a rotation this way, But I highly recommend 0 enter. I highly recommend getting used to the shortcut keys, not just for this program, but for any program that you're using, just for the sake of workflow. You're going to end up saving so much time in the long run learning the shortcut keys instead of relying on buttons and menus. But at any rate, what I was getting at is there are options. If I go to View in the menu, I can choose Show Part Info. As you can see, by default it's selected, it's checked. So if I uncheck that, that box disappears. So now even when I have only one item selected, one image selected within my frame, it doesn't pop up. Because I know all of the shortcut keys, I don't need that box pretty much ever unless I want specific information. So it's a lot more convenient for me to just turn the box off completely. So what you can actually do that for any of the in this case, this will be the sub parts of any given window. For instance, here, variable changes. We'll get into what this is in more detail later, but this whole section, most of the time you don't need. So you can go up here and uncheck that, and suddenly this window has a lot more room for the remaining information. And you can do that with a lot of the different things, the things you don't necessarily need too frequently. I can turn off the frame sound. Now I have lots of room for those two things. If I want to, I can get rid of an entire window by going to Show or Hide Windows. I can remove entire parts, like the Image Parts window. If I'm only going to be editing things that are already in my frame preview or editing animations, I can turn that entire window off and give myself more room. There we go, for the frame window. If you ever get lost or hide things that you don't want to hide and you get confused and don't know how to bring things back, you can go into the Auto Arrange Windows section and choose a mode. Here's Frame Edit Mode. It'll automatically adapt itself to your screen size, and that specifically shows the parts you would need to create and edit frames of animations. Then there's Animation Edit Mode, which specifically is to preview your animation that you've already set up, but to tweak timing and things of that sort. And then there is Edit All Mode, which is the default mode, which shows you all of your information. However, it does not yet, at least, automatically bring back these in the view. So if something is missing, for now, you can check that stuff off. I'll probably program it later when you choose Edit All Mode to bring that back. I just haven't gotten to that yet.